MAPS is an acronym for Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship. It's one of the few nationwide programs where we're not just counting birds and looking at trends, but we're looking at nest survival, which is the productivity part, and then survivorship of individual birds, so year to year and within season survivorship. It's run by the Institute for Bird Populations, and they administer all of the stations across the country, and currently there are about 500 of them. The refuge has never done anything specifically with land birds, so anything we're finding out through the program is news to us. And I think one of the more interesting things that is already sort of a trend that we've seen over the last 2 years is that certain birds seem to be doing really well, and then others are not doing so well. The pattern seems to be that our short distance or resident birds, the birds that don't go very far after they breed to their wintering grounds, they're doing really well. And then the warbler species like our Wilson's warblers and our yellow warblers, they are not doing so well, and they are longer distance migrants. So these are birds that when they leave here travel long distances down to the southern US, into Central and sometimes into South America. So those two species, we don't have very good return rates on the adults. We don't see very many young. And conversely, some of our other common species like fox sparrows and hermit thrush, and this year golden crown kinglets, these are birds that don't migrate very far, and they are doing really well. We're seeing lots of young birds, both seasons that we've looked at. It'll be interesting to see if those kind of patterns continue, and this is the sort of information we could use in the future for more directed studies at looking at possible reasons why certain birds are doing well in certain years and certain species aren't doing so well. We wanted to focus on a riparian area, so sort of a wet area with dense shrubs. For us, it's primarily alder and willow, where we would have high bird densities. Right? So we run 10 nets. The nets are strung out on metal conduit, and the nets are pretty specialized. They are 12 meters long and about 2.5 meters high. And they have, they're built with extra netting that allows the birds to fly in to the net, and then basically they just drop down. The mesh is very fine nylon, that's why they call it mist net. It's so fine, it's like a fine mist. And so the birds are very seldom injured in the nets. They hit the net as they're flying around while they're feeding, or a lot of times they're in territorial disputes with neighbors, so you'll catch more than one bird because the birds are chasing each other around quite a bit. And they hit the net, and then they basically fall into a little pocket of loose netting, and they just hang there until we come around. We try and check the nets about every half hour, every 45 minutes. We do a net run, we extract all the birds from the net. We put them in little cloth bags, bring them back to the banding station, which is sort of centrally located, and then we do all our banding and we release them, and then we go on our next net check. There are a lot of resources out there for banders, and what we try and do is we try to, after we've put an individually coated aluminum band on one leg, we then take a series of measurements, and from the measurements we can determine, in many cases, sex and age of the bird. When we look at the wing feathers, we're looking for the retention of juvenile feathers and for molt. The way a bird molts is useful in aging it. So we're looking at feather wear, and then we're also looking for feather shape, and then we're also looking for molt patterns. So the juveniles molt all at once, whereas an adult will have a synchronous molt. So if it's molting a primary, its sixth primary on the right wing, it should be molting that same primary on the left wing, and that will tell us it's an adult and not a hatch-year bird. So we look at the wing, and particularly the tail feathers, to help age the bird. In 2010, we caught, I think, 16 different species, and then this most recent field season, 2011, we caught 13 different species. So we have a nice diversity, and the program really depends on species being site faithful. So even though these birds are migratory, they come back to the same territory year in and year out. And that's what the program is counting on, because that's where you get your survivorship. You're going to recapture the same bird year in and year out. For 2010, we banded about 280 birds. And then because we missed nets 6 different times during the summer, we have recaptures. So including recaptures, we handled about 330 birds. This year was a little bit slower. We put out new bands on 217 birds, so we caught 217 unbanded birds. And then we had another 30 birds that we recaptured. Some birds we recaptured 3 or 4 times. Basically every single time we misnetted, we caught some individuals. And then we had the 16 birds that we had banded last year that returned, that we caught. So all told, almost 300 birds this year. The benefit is that it's on a national scale, so they can ask of that data set some major and wide scale issues. They can address things like climate change. When we started the program, the idea was to use it as an education and outreach tool, because misnetting is used in other areas for that. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to see land birds, which are, can be a challenge to see up close. Really encouraging people to come multiple times, and we had 10 people this year who volunteered on multiple mornings to come out. We definitely can use their help. If we have any youngsters in the crowd, since they're not allowed to handle the birds, we'll let them release birds, which is pretty exciting. It's, I think, a neat opportunity for them to see just how light, all adaptations for flight, the hollow bones and the air sac system. I think that the kids are amazed at just how little the birds weigh.